Hello, Namaste, and welcome back to the Seedle Diaries. I'm Shitao, and it brings me great pleasure to finally bring you a reading wrap-up video. It's been a while. It's been a long while. I got busy with the summer holidays in August, and then I had an exhibition in September which completely took it out of me, and I think I just took the rest of September off. And then October we had the holidays again, and we had Diwali, and it's completely drained me. So I'm very happy to be back with a wrap-up video. However, it does mean I've got 4 months worth of reading to go through, and I've got just over 30 books to discuss. In an attempt to avoid this video being too long, I think what I'll do is I'll just give a brief overview, a very brief summary of what the book is about and my thoughts on it. Also, please forgive me because, let's be honest, I'm going all the way back to July and my memory isn't as great as it used to be, especially if I didn't enjoy the books as much. I probably won't remember them too well, so I don't know. I'll try my best. I will try my best as always. The first book I read in July was Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, and it is by the same author that wrote The House in the Cerulean Sea, which I absolutely adored. I love that book, and this book definitely met expectations as well. The story is about Wallace, who meets Grimace, the Grim Reaper, Death, basically, at his funeral, and he is not ready to die. And we basically go on his journey of how his life or death progresses after that. So although it sounds a bit morbid, I assure you this book was hilarious. It was fun, it was whimsical, it was quirky, everything that you would expect from a TJ Klune book. I was laughing out loud. It was emotional. It talks about death, but in such a light-hearted way. It definitely is a feel-good book, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it a 4.75. The next book that I read was Powerful by Lauren Roberts, and it's a novella. It's book 1.5 of the trilogy. Book 1 was Powerless. Book 2, which is already out now, is Reckless. In Powerful, we follow Adina's story, so if you've read Powerless, then you'll know who Adina is. And if you haven't read Powerless, then I don't recommend you reading Powerful, because it's based like a dual timeline, so you will end up finding out what happens at the end of Powerless if you read Powerful. So I would say read it in publication order. And Adina, who I already loved from book 1, but is Payden's best friend, who is our MC in the first book. But Powerful follows Adina's story, in which she is left to fend for herself on the streets of Lut, where she's from. And it's after being separated from her best friend slash family, who is Payden. And along the way, she's almost caught stealing, and she is rescued by Mac, and we follow their journey. I love Lauren Roberts' writing. The way she evokes all the emotions, the way she writes about love, anger, heartbreak, it hits a different level for me. This book, although it's one of those ones that was small but powerful, very apt, and no pun intended, but there we go. I really enjoyed the book. I also just love the way she writes her romance within books. It's very slow burn, but it gives me those butterfly feelings, which I really enjoy. And overall, I gave the book a 4 stars. Next was the first thriller I've read in a very, very long time, and that is The Silent Patient. The story is about Alice, who has, or seemingly had, a perfect life, and has been found having shot her husband in the face 5 times. We journey through with a criminal psychotherapist to find out why. This book was so clever and smooth. It was so well written and well paced. I was engrossed the whole time. Even when I found myself having like certain theories, I kind of nipped them in the bud. I just wanted to get through the book. I wanted to know more and more. So I didn't even have time to stop to digest the theories, to think about it, but more to question just to question anymore. It was just really well paced. I really enjoyed the book. I have one gripe, one issue, which I can't tell you because it would just be a major spoiler, but it was just near the end of the book. And I was just thinking, well, how could that have happened? Where was the time for that to happen? That's all I'm going to say. However, it hasn't taken away from my experience of enjoying the book and reading it. So for that, I've given it a 4.5 stars. I also got around to reading Midnight's Children. It's a book I've been wanting to read for a very long time. Salim is born at the stroke of midnight on India's Independence Day. And as he grows, he learns that he shares a special gift with other children that were born at the exact time as him. I really wanted to enjoy this book, and unfortunately I just didn't. I just found it boring, to be honest. That's my honest opinion, and it might be quite controversial, as was the book, I find. That's not why I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't interested in the story. It's definitely well written, but the storyline, it did nothing for me, to be honest. So unfortunately for me, it's a 2.75 stars. In July, I read part 1 of Iron Flame, and then I read part 2 in August, but I'll just cover it in July's. So Iron Flame is book 2 in the Empyrean trilogy. And I won't go too much into it because when it comes to reviewing books that are part of a series, I don't like to summarize too much of what happens in book 2 and beyond. I feel like it might give away what's happened in book 1, if you follow me. However, what I will say is when it comes to the first half of the book, so part 1 of Iron Flame, I felt started quite slow considering it carried on. It was continuous from the very end of book 1, Fourth Wing. It started very slow for me. It picked up near the ending of part 1. Part 2, I really did enjoy it. There was a lot of repetition, I felt. A lot of description around things like it was cliff climbing. I got bored. I got bored with that, but I enjoyed the story. I just felt like it could have progressed a lot quicker than what it did. We've got new characters. Again, there's lots and lots of characters within the story, and at one point I did switch off, but we do have some of my beloved characters that come back, or not come back, but are continuous from book 1. I felt at times the romance within the book felt a bit forced. I don't know, that was just my personal opinion. Having said that, overall I cried in book 1, which I didn't think I would do, and I ended up crying in book 2 as well. I did really enjoy the book, but it was definitely a roller coaster for me. And I think overall, what did I give it? Okay, I'm just reading. I think overall I gave it 3.75, but I'm just reading some notes that I wrote on it. Again, it's about the repetition, not just in storyline, but in the actual narration and dialogue. I think it's because there's several times where, is it Violet? I haven't written it down word for word of the quote, but there's several times where Violet just explains that nothing else matters when it's just them two together. And it's just repetitive, like we get it. I don't remember, again, I read it so long, but something about the same description about lines between brows. I think it probably was word for word because I have written that. I felt like there was a lot of copying and pasting going on. But anyway, I know that's just nitpicking, and like I said, I did enjoy it. It left on a really big, great cliffhanger, and so I'm definitely invested in starting book 3 when it comes out. I also read Tamarind and the Star of Ishtar, which is a junior fiction / middle grade book. I read it to my daughter, and I've just decided to start including some of the books that I read to her within my wrap-up video. I enjoy the escapism into those books as well. Tamarind arrives at her late mother's ancestral home in India, where she goes on a magical journey to learn about her mother's past, and in turn she learns more about her own identity. It's a sweet book, and the story itself I did enjoy. However, I didn't enjoy the writing so much, and I don't think that's got anything to do with the writing as such. I think it's more because it's written in first person. a first-person narrative in present tense, and I was reading it out aloud to my daughter. It just didn't feel very comfortable reading it, and that's probably just me, but because of that I just didn't enjoy reading it as aloud as much. But I haven't given it a star rating. I don't know if it's fair for me to rate junior fiction / middle grade books, because I know they're aimed at a younger audience, so I can't rate it at the same scale as I would the older books. I don't know. It's a difficult one for me. It's the same with autobiographies. I feel really uncomfortable rating those as well. So I haven't rated it, but if you don't mind that kind of narration, then I do think it's a sweet book to read. And finally in July I read Happy Place. This was my first Emily Henry book. I had started reading it previously and I just couldn't get into it for some reason. Maybe I wasn't in the mood. So I tried again, and I will say it started off a bit, I don't know, it was a slow start for me. It wasn't until we got into around 100 pages in that it started to pick up. And it wasn't until around 200 pages in where I felt more invested in the characters and the plot. We have Harriet and Wynne, who have recently broken up, but they haven't told their best friends. They are a group of 6 best friends who get together annually at a cottage in Maine, I believe. And it's their annual getaway together. So they haven't told their friends they've broken up, yet they discover that this year when they do meet at their annual getaway, it is their last one because the cottage itself is being put up for sale. So Harriet and Wynne decide not to tell their friends. There's that whole close proximity where they're fake dating, if that's the kind of trope you like. It took me a while to get into this book, and when I did eventually get into it, I enjoyed it. It's just one of those that I liked, I didn't love. I do get why people love her writing style though. I did really enjoy Emily Henry's writing. Just the quick wit, the banter. I had a good time with that. Just the plot itself, maybe I was expecting too much from it. I'm not too sure. I gave a 3.5 stars, and I did like it enough for it to begin a Emily Henry reading streak for me, because in August I read 2 of her books. So as I mentioned, I continued with my Emily Henry reading streak into August, and it started with Book Lovers. We meet Nora, who is a literary agent who goes on a trip with her sister Libby to, I think it's called Sunshine Falls. We meet Charlie, who is an editor and happens to be Nora's rival. And yeah, we follow their little adventure together. In this book, I really enjoyed the relationship between the 2 sisters, so Libby and Nora. And for me, a lot of the book felt more like Charlie was an add-on character until maybe a third way through. I just don't think Charlie was a character that I don't know, I felt much for. I found him to be a bit flat up until maybe it was more because he was grumpy, but I don't know. I mean, we do get to learn more about the reason behind the grump later in the book, but I don't know, by then I didn't really feel much for him. And I did love the relationship between the 2 sisters though. It was a good read. It gave those nice cozy small town vibes, and I did give it a 3.5 stars. After that I read Beach Read, which is another Emily Henry book. This one is about 2 writers, January and Gus. January writes romance novels and Gus writes about literary fiction. The problem is that January no longer believes in love and Gus is stuck in a rut. So they both agree to taking part in a challenge to help them get out of their writing slumps. And I found it to be quite a fun summer read. I've already mentioned it, but I really do enjoy Emily Henry's wit, the banter, the way she writes. It's right up my street. I gave it a 3.5 stars. Next, I read A Court of Silver Flames. Is it book 3 or 4? I think it's book 4. I can't remember. It's part of the Agatar series. I'm not going to go into what it's about because you have to read the other books. And I don't want you to know what this book is about or who's in this book. I was told early on in my Agatar reading journey which characters are in this book and what this book is about, with I think most of them, and it ruins it for me a bit, and I don't want to do the same for you, especially with fantasy. I mean, it can happen in any book, but especially with fantasy where I feel the stakes are usually so high. I don't want to know which characters are going to be in book 4 or in book 2. I don't want to know because it will, in a sense, give away what will happen in book 1. I mean, I know maybe they can travel back in time, maybe they can come back to life. Whatever it is, I'm just not going to tell you what happens in A Court of Silver Flames. What I will say is I felt it started a bit slow, but I think that's because the previous books, the universe, the world has already been built, and book 3 is quite action-packed. Book 3.5 is small little novella. So in this book, book 4, it starts a little bit slow, but it's fine. I was fine with that because we get a lot more character development in it. The story progresses further. There are twists in the story. It was still a very, very fun time. And so yeah, I gave it a 4.75 stars. Another book I read, part of the series, was The Brothers Hawthorne, part of the Inheritance Games series. So The Brothers Hawthorne is book number 4. It follows Grayson and Jameson. It's two separate stories, one story, 2 separate plots. And again, I had, as per the other Inheritance Games books, I really enjoyed this one. I had a good time. It was fast paced. I would say I was a bit, not let down, maybe slightly let down. I thought it would be more about all 4 brothers, and it was mainly about 2 brothers, but we do get more characters and we get more character development. But I did enjoy it overall, and I gave it 4 stars. I also read Carrie Soto is Back. I didn't know what to expect for this one. I had slightly high hopes because it is by Taylor Jenkins Reid, whose writing I absolutely love. But I wasn't too sure because the book is about, it's about a tennis player. Carrie Soto has retired from playing tennis. She was at the top of the game, the best of the best, and she's retired. However, her title of being the best, it has been threatened, and so she decides to come out of retirement to, what's the word I'm looking for? But you hold on to your title. That's not the word I'm looking for, but I'll go with that. To hold on to her title and not let someone else claim it from her. And yes, she did it again. This lady, I don't know how she manages to write such wonderful material. It's like you're watching a movie. I had a great time reading it. I definitely recommend it. I gave it 4.5 stars. And even if you don't like tennis, I'm impartial to tennis. I don't watch it. I have nothing against it, but I still loved this book, and I think you would too. Next up is a book that just shocked me completely. I read Piranesi. I don't know how to describe this book. I will say Piranesi is someone that lives in a house that is not a typical house, and he seems to be all alone, other than this one person who visits him once or twice a week, asking Piranesi for his help, for some research. I don't know what else to say without giving anything away. I read it in August, and we're in November now, and I am still just so baffled by the book. In a good way, I think. I don't know. I'm glad I read it. A lot of it made sense, and then so much of it didn't, and I think that's the beauty of the book, or maybe that's just me, and maybe everyone else that's read it knows exactly what the writer was aiming for. But I enjoyed it. It was definitely a page turner. It was one of those ones where I feel like my brow was probably furrowed the whole time. It's a good book I'm not going to be rushing to grab a Suzanne Clarke book just yet, but it's left me intrigued enough to want to read more of her writing because I just find it very, very different. And I gave it a 3.5 stars. The next book I read in August, I wouldn't recommend reading it in August. I mean, you can. I still really, really enjoyed it, but it is, let me tell you the book first. It is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. And the reason I don't recommend it in August is because it's set in winter. We've got the snow, and it definitely gives such wonderful cozy vibes that if you can, hold out until winter, or at least autumn. But we follow Emily, who is a professor of, I don't know the correct term for it, but she basically studies fae. And she goes on an expedition to study more fairy folklore, upon which she discovers dark magic. And I just want to read some things that I've written, because I did write notes. One of the things I've written was that I was rolling my eyes to some of the folklore stories, but it's because the ones where something happens or is said, but then the person dies. So you wonder, how has that story been passed on or down with no witnesses around? Now, surely I can't be the only one here. It's like one of those riddles where someone dreamed about something in particular and then they died in their dream. How do you know they dreamed about that thing then? Because they died. They couldn't have told you. So it's like that. But I mean, that's not the author's fault. It's it's just one of those things that I don't get. So yeah, I roll my eyes like that. However, and I have written, it hasn't taken away from my enjoyment of the book. Okay, so now we're definitely midway through the book and I'm already smiling my way through the first paragraph. There were several delicious plot twists that I didn't see coming and I loved it. It was such a joyfully enchanting and whimsical read. I loved the main characters' relationship, their banter and even their flaws made them so much more likable. I liked the villagers and their ways. A very comforting, snuggly read. A solid 4.75 stars, and I can't wait to get stuck into the next. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't give it a 5-star, because I really, really enjoyed it and I can't wait to read the next one. And the only reason I haven't started reading the next one is because I was waiting for winter to get into the snuggly feels, and I will be reading it this month. In August, I also began the Shiva trilogy, which is a reimagining of one of the Hindu gods, Shivji. I read the first book, which was The Immortals of Meluha. I enjoyed the plot of this book. I did not enjoy the storytelling at all. The characters seemed a bit flat, and the conversation, the dialogue between them felt very wooden. It was very much Shiv said this, Nandi said that, Shiv said this, Nandi said... There was a lot of that, and I don't know, it just didn't flow for me. It really didn't flow. But like I said, I did enjoy the plot, and I felt with this book it was well paced. So I gave it 3.5 stars, and it did leave me wanting to know more. And finally in August, I read The Girl Who Drank the Moon. This book was such a whimsical delight. It has my heart. Every year, the organization, whose name I don't remember, every year they leave a baby out near a tree for the witch of the forest as a sacrifice, hoping that it will stop her from terrorizing everyone else in the town. And this one year, the witch accidentally feeds the baby the moon, and so the baby has some magical abilities that we learn about. I won't say much more than that. This story is one that it's low stakes, yet I was so highly invested in so many of the characters in this book. I'm upset that there isn't more of it, but I really, really adored it, and I would definitely recommend it. Especially, it gives Studio Ghibli vibes, so if that's the kind of thing that you like, then I highly, highly recommend it. I gave it 4.5 stars. For September, I wanted to get into the cozy, autumnal, snuggly season vibes, And what better way other than with a bit of pumpkin spice. Pumpkin Spice Cafe is a story in which Jeannie has been gifted the Pumpkin Spice Cafe by her aunt, and it's based in a very small town called Dream Harbour, where she meets grumpy, what's his name? Logan, who is the local farmer. This book it's just what you expect it to be. It is low stakes, small town, cozy feels. It has got quite a bit of spice, which I was not expecting, so I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. It definitely had the cozy, small town, autumnal vibes. I enjoyed reading it. It did exactly what I expected it to do, and I gave it a 3.25 stars. Another book that gave me those warm, cozy feels, just pure cottagecore, was The Spell Shop. I didn't really know what to expect from this book, but it was just pure sunshine in a book for me. Think romantasy, but make it cottagecore. So we have, I don't know if it's Keela or Kayla, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but she's escaping a revolution, and she's come back to her parents' home. Parents are no longer alive, but she has come back to her parents' home, which is this cottage in a small little village, and she's hoping to start afresh, make a new life here. It was just so sweet, and again definitely gave me Studio Ghibli vibes. I gave it a 3.75 stars. In keeping with the fantasy theme, I finally got to read When the Moon Hatched. I had been eyeing this book for months. This book delivered on so many fronts. There's fantasy, romance, dragons, magic. It has definitely left me wanting more, and I can't believe I have to wait a whole year for the next book to come out. It's a very long time to wait, but hey ho. Our main character, Rave, is an assassin who has been captured for killing, is it a prince or someone high up, who isn't a very nice person anyway, but she's been captured for killing him. We spend some time with her in prison and then go along with her for her sentencing, and you will need to read the book to find out the rest, but I assure you, you won't be disappointed. It's fun, it's fast-paced, and I gave it 4.75 stars. The Couple Next Door is the thriller that I read in September. I'm trying to expand on my genres that I read each month, so I'm getting back into thrillers. I do enjoy them. This one, I will say, it was okay for me. It was just okay. It's about a couple who leave their 6-month-old baby daughter at home whilst they go for dinner at their neighbour's house. The neighbour has requested that the daughter doesn't come with them because they just think they won't have as good a time. And the baby goes missing. That's all I'll say. I found a lot of what happened in the story wasn't very surprising, and I think that's why it was a bit of a letdown for me. However, it was a very short book. It was a very quick read. It's possibly a good book to get out of a reading slump if you just want something quick, and it wasn't awful. It wasn't very shocking for me. It wasn't very thrilling for me, if that makes sense. And I gave it a 3 stars. Another book that had been on my TBR for years now that I finally got around to reading was The Kite Runner. The story is set in 1970s Afghanistan, and it revolves around 2 young boys who are friends. One who is determined to win the kite tournament, and his young friend has agreed to help him. If you have not read it and you plan to, I would say please check the content warnings. I should say that about all books, but this one in particular, there are several trigger warnings. The book left me feeling very angry, upset, a lot of rage. There was a lot of rage. It's a book about loyalty, but I also feel just cruelty in a way, and redemption. It's really well written, but I can honestly say I'm just not built for books like that anymore. And the reason I really wanted to read it previously was because when I had originally read A Thousand Splendid Suns, I really enjoyed that book, and I'd heard such great things about The Kite Runner by the same author, so I had wanted to read it for so long. I wouldn't say I would never read one of his books again. I have to have a very certain mindset. Just if I need to make sure I am emotionally and mentally ready for certain types of books, and I feel like his books are those type of books. So nothing against his writing. Like I said, he is an amazing writer, but if it's a book that you're wanting to read, then just check the content warnings. Unfortunately, I've given it a 3 stars. To be honest, it probably is deserving of more, but I'm rating it in regards to my reading experience and enjoyment of reading it. I didn't enjoy reading it, and so it's a 3 stars. Another 3-star book for me in September was The Secret of the Nagas, which is book number 2 in the Shiv trilogy. I found it was very similar. The plot continued to intrigue me. The writing, I felt the writing was a little bit better than book number 1, but again, it just wasn't great. One thing I really appreciated about this book is the little lessons that are put within the book, especially around things about the masculine and feminine. I really enjoyed that, the way it's broken down to just be a lot more understandable, if that makes sense. It probably doesn't. But what I don't really enjoy about the book is a lot of it just feels like history lesson, but like a chronological history lesson. I just felt because it's more of a retelling or reimagining, you can just be a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? A bit more daring. A bit more daring with just the writing itself. It just felt like it could have been more. What I mean is everyone just felt like they were good. They were either really, really good or they were just good. There was no bad or really bad or extreme. They were retelling the story. And yes, I get no one's good or bad, just they either do good or they do bad. But then you are making people out to be good or great. Mahadev. I don't know. It felt a bit short for me. But like I said, I was still enjoying it, the plot. So this one was a 3.25 stars for me. Next in September, as I had finished all the ACOTAR written to date, I decided to embark on the Crescent City series. I know there's the Throne of Glass as well, but I feel like because that's such a big series, it's a bit intimidating, and I think I want to leave that until next year. I read House of Earth and Blood, and I really enjoyed it. It is another fantasy book, however this one is set in a more urban scene, which I really, really appreciated. It's something different. Our female MC Bryce is a bit of a party goer, and she's been locked up and accused of mass murdering. And we have our male MC who is, why have I forgotten his name? Hunt Atherlaw, who is a fallen angel, and he has been assigned to help Bryce discover who is truly behind the mass murderings. I did feel that there were maybe a bit too many characters, especially with there's so many different types of species and their powers. But I get that comes with world building, and it wasn't so much that I couldn't keep up. Oh, and I did also feel that sometimes, so the romance is a slow burn romance, and at times it was a bit too slow for me. But I still enjoyed the book. I had tears at a point. Yes, I did. I wasn't sure how I felt about how it ended, like the very ending of it. Overall, I had a good time and I gave it 4 stars. The final book that I read in September, which I lapped up, was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It's my first V.E. Schwab book, and I adored her writing style. It is most definitely not going to be my last book that I read of her. I can't wait to actually pick up another book by her. The story is set in France, and Addie LaRue, who wants to escape her current life, makes a deal with the god in the darkness. Is it the god of darkness? Well, a god in the darkness. She makes this deal in which she gets to live forever, however, she's forgotten by everyone. And she goes about her days living and meeting people, but them not remembering her. And she spends 300 years like this until one day in a bookstore she meets a man who remembers her name. That's the premise of the book. I was hooked by that anyway. It's a dual timeline setting. I really enjoyed it. It's still very, very fresh in my mind, and I think that's the way that V.E. Schwab, she's written the book. It's very vivid and poetic writing. I adored it, like I said, and it's solid 5 stars for me. And finally, in October, I believe I read 3 non-fiction books. I finished the Shiv trilogy, and I read another Emily Henry book, and a few others as well. So we'll start with Oath of the Veiled Buddhas, which is book number 3 in the Shiva trilogy. I really struggled with this book. I don't know what happened, but it went downhill at a very fast pace, which the book itself was not. It was unnecessarily long. I'm pretty sure during the second half of the book, I was skimming through some pages just because I wanted to get through with it. I was almost like I didn't care anymore, but I just wanted the book to be over. One of the battle scenes, it was just so out of sync for the rest of the whole trilogy, the writing style. It was so gory, it just didn't fit with the rest of the book or the books. So unfortunately, as much as I had such high hopes for this trilogy, this book in particular was 2.5 stars for me. And I don't know, that's probably me being generous. The next book was the Emily Henry book that I read, You and Me on Vacation. I think it's known by a different name outside of the UK, but I can't remember what it is. And it's really odd because vacation isn't an English, well, it's not a British word anyway, so I don't know why there's two different names. But best friends Poppy and Alex, who have been going on holiday or on vacation every year for the last 10 years. And 2 years ago, something happened between them that ruined everything for them. Poppy really misses Alex and their friendship and their holidays together, so she has this one last chance to rekindle their friendship. I really enjoy the characters. As per usual, I like their banter. They just had a really sweet relationship. I just don't know how I feel about how the book ended. Still not sure how I feel about that, but I gave it a 3.5 stars. I also finally got around to reading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I don't know how much I should say about it, but it's the prequel to The Hunger Games, and it's the story of Coriolanus Snow, who we know, well, if you've read The Hunger Games, we know him as President Snow. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is his story, basically from when he was 18 years old, and we follow his journey into The Hunger Games. And although I had read The Hunger Games so long, it's been so many years, I read it when it first came out, it's still, going back to Panem felt so familiar. I really liked it. It was different, I was intrigued, it was well paced. I do feel like that's Suzanne Collins' writing style. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the next book. I believe it's coming out, is it next May? I'm not too sure, but I'm really looking forward to that, and I gave this one a 4 stars. The next 3 books that I'll go through are the non-fiction books that I read. Number 1 was The Untethered Soul, which has been on my TBR for such a long time. It's basically a book that helps you find inner peace, and it does so by teaching you about mindfulness, and it goes a lot more deeper than that. For me, I don't think I learned anything new, but I do think it's a very good book for beginners, and I gave it a 3.75 stars. I also read Think and Grow Rich, which is one of the OGs when it comes to books about motivation and mindset. For me, a lot of the lessons in there, or a lot of the book, I already knew about, so I didn't feel like I learned anything new. Having said that, I do think it's a great book, especially the fact that it was originally published just after the Great Depression, and I feel if you had got your hands on the book back then, it would have probably been miraculous for you, and that's probably why the book has got so much praise. For me, it's very different because I've been on this journey for a very long time. Before I started BookTube and before I got back into reading so much, I was literally solely reading self-help books, motivational books, books on manifestation, just all of that for quite a few years before that. And I appreciate a lot of what I've learnt has been from the teachings within this book. But because of that, I feel reading the book now, I just didn't have as much of a good time, or I didn't learn anything new. But it's still good for reinforcement. I would say you do need to remember that this book, just remember when it was written, the kind of audience, it was written for a very specific audience. So just when you're reading it, you might take offense to some of it, but just remember the lessons within the book, because they are very important and they can be life-changing if you put into practice what you read within the book. And I give it 3.75 stars. The final non-fiction book that I've read in October was 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think. This book you have to read. It's a book that will definitely change the way you think. It will wake you up to new ideas, new ways of thinking. It will help you to grow. It will help you to heal. It touches lightly on deep subjects. It's just little bite-sized nuggets of wisdom. It gave me some great reminders. It taught me some new things. I highly recommend this book to everyone, and I had to give it 5 stars. My book club book for October was The Kamogawa Food Detectives. It is a book about an agency, well, a father-daughter duo who have a food detective agency, in which they recreate certain dishes that help take people back to certain times of their lives to evoke memories or emotions. And the premise of this book was so sweet, and I was really looking forward to it, but unfortunately for me, it just didn't deliver. Within our book club, I have to say, we all were very highly surprised about how this book was a bestseller. As I said, the premise of the book sounds so great, but when it came to reading it, it just didn't have the oomph it needed. A lot of it was just, okay, why are you telling me this? And what's that got to do with it? And okay, you've mentioned this 2, 3, 4 times, but it felt like it was lacking in substance. Being a book about food, it just, for me, it was lacking in flavour. I thought that was quite clever. And by flavour, I don't mean that I was expecting certain recipes to be tasty. I just mean it was quite flat for me. So yeah, I think I gave it 2.5 stars. And my last book for October had me swept back to Dream Harbour in the Cinnamon Bun bookstore. I don't know if I should mention the characters in it. I won't, because if you haven't read the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, then it might throw you off knowing the names. But if you do read it, or if you have read it, then it will probably give it away, because by the end of Pumpkin Spice Cafe, I could tell who was going to be in the second book. I hope you're following. As mentioned, the story takes us back to our cozy little town of Dream Harbour. There is a mystery element in the book. It's not huge, but it's a bit of fun. There's one of the tropes, there's several tropes, but one of the ones, and it really annoyed me, it's miscommunication. But this one, to the extent where it was just very repetitive, it was just like in your face quite often, and that took away from me enjoying the book as much. I still like the characters. I liked the representation of male mental issues within the book. It was fun. This one was slow for me. It was slower than the previous one, so I did enjoy it, but just not as much. The last 60 pages or so, it made it up for me. So although I didn't enjoy it as much as the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, I was still grateful for the cozy vibes, and I gave it 3 stars. So those are all the books that I've read for the last 4 months. I did have another 2 DNFs. Let's see. One was Twisted Love. I just found the male character very flat, and I was trying to force myself to read it to see if I could get into it, but I just wasn't interested in the story, wasn't interested in the characters. I just wasn't interested. So that was a DNF for me. And the other one was Everless by Sarah Holland. It's a duology. So I've got Evermore, and I thought I'd read Everless because that's the first one. It's a soft DNF for me. It started well paced, but I just wasn't gripped, and I think it's because the storyline itself, or as it started, it felt very familiar. The character, the setting, the story, it all just felt like something I'd read before, and that's not taking away from the author. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood for it. I would want to go back to it. It's not that it was a bad book, it wasn't the right time for me. I'm really hoping that this little big gap that we had, the 4-month gap of me not posting anything really, but especially my monthly wrap-up and TBR videos, I hope it was just a one-off and that it won't happen again. I did say that I want to keep accountable for it. And having said that, I'm pretty sure my 1-year booktube anniversary is coming up. So it would be nice if I can stay accountable and maybe do something fun for that as well. We'll see. But if you have stayed this long, then I hope you've enjoyed the video. I thank you so much for watching, and I would love for you to subscribe. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you very soon. Take care. Goodbye.